On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, Taming the High Cost of College. So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Shawn Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I am joined again remotely this week by your financial coach, George Corbello. How you doing, George?
I'm doing well. I just traffic and schedule. It's like, okay, so we'll do it remotely this week. Not a big deal. I mean, if I'm a financial coach via remote, I think I could do a show once in a while remotely too. So thank you, Shawn.
Well, and you're saving money. You're saving gas money.
Saving money. There you go.
Versus me, on the other hand, I took the spare time by not having to rush here to let you into the office. I went out to a networking breakfast. Spent a bunch of money at breakfast. As soon as we're done recording, I'm heading to lunch, spending a bunch of money at a networking lunch. So,
we might need to no spend challenge again.
Another no spend challenge. Although this is all networking, so hopefully business comes out of it.
There you go.
So we do want to talk about a couple of our sponsors right here. We do have a guest for you this week, but before we get there, we want to talk about a couple of our sponsors real quick. So we've mentioned them the last couple of weeks. Magic Mind. Magic Mind has been a big supporter of the show. Thank you. We did test their product, so we wouldn't have promoted it if we didn't try it, if we didn't like it. It's great. It helps with focus. It doesn't give you the sugar high. It doesn't give you the sugar crash.
The crash is the more important one.
Yeah, the crash is. It tastes good, and really, I felt more focused when I took it on a regular basis, as I take it on a regular basis.
Yeah, I like it.
I feel more focused. So thank you, Magic Mind. You can use our code, which is magicmind.com/crushdebt, and then put in the code crushdebt, and you will get a discount. They offer subscription. They offer one-time purchases. We recommend the subscription because that's the more cost-effective, especially if you're trying to. You can't do a show about saving money and then tell people to spend more money. Get the subscription, which will be a little bit cheaper. Also, Sam Cohen with Attorneys First Insurance is back. And so Sam writes errors and omissions insurance for attorneys and title companies all over the country. What I love about Sam is the apples to apples comparison. And Sam is not going to try to sell you if he doesn't have a product that he thinks will do better for you. So if you're an attorney, if you're a title company, even if you've had a claim maybe in the past, a malpractice claim maybe in the past, give Sam a buzz, sam@attorneysfirst.com, or his website, attorneysfirst.com, and see what kind of options he has there for you. But I also do want to get to our guest this week because it's something that's probably going to be very relevant to George and probably something that's going to be more relevant to me in about 5 or 6 years from now. So our guest is one of the nation's leading college financial experts. He teaches families the best ways to plan, save, and pay for college so they can make their children's college dreams come true without wiping out their finances or their retirement. For over 20 years, he's shared his expertise and insights through his private practice as a blogger and host of the Taming the High Cost of College podcast, and as a presenter at numerous workshops and seminars. Welcome our guest, Brad Baldridge. Welcome, Brad.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I do want to mention Taming the High Cost of College is your podcast. It's also your website, tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. It's also, if people want to find you on LinkedIn or Facebook, both of those are under Taming the High Cost of College. But I guess let's kind of jump right into it because you've got on this show parents at both ends of the spectrum. George has one in college and one getting ready to go to college. Yep. Mine are 12 and 9, so 6th grade and 4th grade. So you got both ends of the spectrum here. Both of us wondering how we're gonna. I told my kids, you're just gonna have to be really smart and get scholarships.
Yeah, that's what I told them, and we're still falling short here. So,
yeah, that's a strategy that works for very few, but it does work.
Well, either that or a NCAA D1 scholarship, sports scholarship. Maybe.
That's not happening in my house, that's for sure.
Yes.
So what do we do? Where, you got both ends of the spectrum. Maybe start with George because he's already got to fund the college campaign.
Mine is 20 already, so she's in her second year. So there was always opportunity. I always tell my daughter there's always opportunity for scholarships. So again, some of the things for her. And then I've got a sophomore in high school who's getting ready. So I'm in that late stage. And of course, as much as I'd like to say I was bankrolling we're not fully prepared for that college experience. So, what am I supposed to do at this time?
Right. Yeah. So when we start talking about late stage planning, and again, let's, I guess, explain the term. So late stage is when you have kids in high school and you're there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Early stage would be on that other end of the spectrum. You've got younger kids and, hey, we're pregnant, or we've got a 4-year-old or whatever. You can plan for college as part of the kind of the family budget and that type of thing, but you're not visiting colleges. You're not trying to pick a school. There's certain things that you have to wait on. And that gets pushed into the late stage. So late stage, now we're there, right? We're visiting colleges. We're trying to figure out how we're going to pay for it. And then when we're actually at college, then there's just the kind of executing the plan, hopefully, that we put together in high school. So I tell people, you really want to get started earlier than what we as parents did. I'm probably a little older than you guys because I've got all my kids I have a 2 in college and 1 in high school, and I had kids when I was older. So when I went to college, just to put it into perspective, I just found my old ACT paperwork, and the tuition listed for the college I attended was $1,800 for the year. To give you, and again, it was a state school, but so way back then, it wasn't, it was much less expensive. And most of the time we didn't work that hard at it. We just kind of waited till the end of junior year or senior year, picked a couple of colleges and didn't make a big deal out of it. Now it's a much bigger deal. It's much more expensive, and it deserves much more time and attention because it's so expensive.
Right.
So I think that's, kind of where you start is, all right, we need to work at this. You need to get started earlier where you can. I recommend sophomore year because the timelines, I'm sure, as you're aware, right, is by the beginning of the senior year of high school, you're applying for college and that.
Correct. Yep.
Well, if you're going to be applying at the beginning of the senior year, by the end of the junior year, you should have a school list of colleges that you're interested in, so you know where you're going to be applying soon. And again, lots of people don't have it quite done, and then they're scrambling and saying, well, we got to get applications out, and we got to figure out where we're applying, and we got to do some testing, and and all of a sudden It all piles up. So to avoid that, understanding the timeline and kind of backing things up and saying, all right, all of junior year is a good time to get a lot of this done. So your testing, your visits, your college research, building your school list, making a scholarship plan, and then the big scary one, which is how are we going to pay for all this?
Right.
So some of these things we do as a family. We work with the student when we go on a visit. We work with the student when we figure out our testing plan. Some of these things are kind of in the student's court. Hopefully they do the applications and the essays and they figure out what they want to be when they grow up. Hopefully we as parents are not assigning them a major and doing that kind of stuff. Although I've seen that happen a lot, right?
Where engineer sounds really good.
Exactly.
I'd be,
so hopefully that,
I'd be a veterinarian if my mom had her way.
There you go.
Exactly. And there's always the doctor and lawyer culture of,
right.
You need to be one of those, pick one. But that's, I think, the challenge of, so as parents, then your side of the fence really is the financial stuff. Most students don't understand, your tax returns and your income. They don't understand need-based aid. They don't understand merit aid. And most parents don't understand it either. No. But they're the ones that have a chance to figure it out. Most students aren't going to work at it. And again, there's that exceptional student who takes it upon themselves and, is a real go-getter. But most students are, kind of deferring some of that to parents.
Yeah. I've seen that. I've seen that for sure. Not just with my kids in the sense of, we've pushed them. It's like, schools that are affordable, schools that are state versus your private institutions, obviously Ivy League. So there's choice of school helps with some of the cost. Right. And of course, you're right. It's like, hey, if you're going to go to Ivy League and you're going to, major in communications, is that degree going to go farther than some of the other, other things that we may do as well? So that I'd imagine drives that too.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And then you get into, some of that philosophy where lots of people talk about return on investment for college.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, there's lots of parents that are saying something to the effect of, I went to college I enjoyed it. I think it was a great thing to do. I want my kids to do it too. They're not talking about return on investment. They're saying it was a great 4 years and I want to make that happen for my kids.
Right.
It doesn't really matter if there's a return on investment. And obviously, again, a lot of people think having a degree is a good thing. And it certainly, in general, is. But the whole idea of college is for everyone on the other side of that coin is, no, that's not true. There's lots of people that shouldn't be going to college. They should be finding one of the other paths. Right now, about half the students that start college never finish. And again, it's a learning experience. So that might be what forms their life, but it also might be something that just is a very sore spot because they have loans and no degree.
Right.
In many cases. And that's something that I think really needs to be avoided where it can be is, the school hard knocks, internships, there's all kinds of different ways that you can get an education. It doesn't have to be at a college. And lots of people that don't have a college education can attest to that, where, I did it my own way, so to speak. And, so that's two sides of that same coin. So I think where we try and simplify things down to, college for everyone. It's like, no, I would say education for everyone, but how you deliver that education could be drastically different. Even, multiple kids in the same family, you might have completely different paths.
Makes sense.
But as parents, if we want to say we want to help our kids to save up for college, or we want to save up for college for our kids, or however it is we want to do it, how do we figure out, and I know it may be a slightly different analysis for George versus me, because like I said, my oldest is about to be 12, and so we're looking at 6 more years before he has to go to college.
Yeah, dude, that's blink. It'll go quick.
I get it.
Right.
How much should college cost, or how do we determine how much college? Like you said, when I went to college,
it should be free. What are you talking?
It should be free. When I went to college, it was $55 a credit hour, and so if you figure a 12 to 15 credit hour semester, my college, I probably went to school right around the same time you did, because my college cost about $15,000 to $2,000 a year, and that was it. I really didn't hit the big bills until I got to law school. So if we're trying to figure out, for George, who's got a sophomore, for me, who's got, a 6th grader, how do we figure out what's our target? How do we figure out what college costs?
Yes. So when we talk about the actual cost, there's 2 concepts that we need to understand. First, we have the list price, and the cost of attendance is another term that they throw around, but cost of attendance is the total cost of a typical student for 1 year, and it includes tuition, room and board, books, fees, beer, and pizza. The whole cost of a typical student for 1 year.
Got it.
The average state school is about $27,000 right now, and the average private school is about $57,000.
Yep.
But the ranges for the state schools are probably between, around $20,000 to $35,000, and for the private schools, it's between 35, 40, all the way up to about 90, 92, something like that.
That's per year too, which is crazy.
That is per year.
Yeah.
So some of the elite privates and the Ivies and that kind of stuff, they're all, pushing 85 to 90-ish right now. And it's going up every year.
Yep.
And that's, I guess, part of the challenge. On the flip side, they're also very generous with scholarships. So when we talk about the net cost of college, which is really the important number, your net cost, even if it has a high list cost, could be drastically different. As an example, Stanford put out a press release that says, if your income as a family is under $100,000, our college will be free. 0 tuition, 0 room and board, guaranteed.
Wow.
If your family income is below $150,000, then tuition will be 0, but you may have to pay some or all of room and board. So if you think about that and you say, well, Stanford's $80-some thousand price tag scares people away, but the reality of it is, for people that need the money, they have it, and there's a sliding scale, right? So they start, maybe they're approaching 90 there as well. If they're not 90 now, they will be in a year or two. But for a lot of families, it's substantially less. The average free money package is in the $20,000 range at private schools, and that's average. and it can be substantially more. Again, as an example, you could get $90,000 off a $90,000 school at some of these elite schools. So understanding how the game is played, I think, is a big challenge. It's the equivalent of saying having coupons at the car dealership, right? Oh, I didn't know there's a 50% off deal going on at the car dealer across the street, so I bought this one instead of that one, and I just didn't know. That's kind of how it feels, because it's an expensive purchase. You need to do your shopping and understand the game, and when you start getting involved in it, you realize the game's pretty complicated.
Yes, indeed.
Are these?
I love that FAFSA form. I gotta tell you, filling it out. It was like, oh wait, did I fill it out, or did I do my annual attestation? I'm like, what is it that I just signed? That was as a parent and doing this with my daughter, I was like, which am I doing this right? Even the website is not intuitive in regards to one thing or the other. So yeah, that is always fun from a parent standpoint.
Well, yeah. So, there's some good news, bad news on that front, which is they've completely redone the FAFSA. So starting this fall, so if you've got a high school senior right now, you're the first class that's going to be filling out the new FAFSA. And of course, you have retuning students, so you're going to have to fill out the new FAFSA too.
Yep.
So all the fun you've learned is now obsolete. You're going to have to learn how to do it all over again.
Of course it is.
They're redesigning the form. They're trying to make it easier, and they are. I believe it will be quite a bit easier. It's kind of a consolation prize for you, because you learned the hard way, and now you have to relearn a different way. So you'd rather it just stay the same, so that you could just do what you did last year.
True.
But what's happening is also putting a lot of turmoil in the system this year, because all the colleges have to learn a completely new process. It's actually going to be coming out delayed. Normally it's available starting in October. This year they're saying December. And if again, this is the government we're talking about. So is December a real date or not? We don't know yet. But hopefully things will go smoothly. We'll kind of wait and see. But because of all these changes, the formulas have changed. So a lot of the information on the internet is based on the old system, and now you really have to pay attention and make sure that you're considering the information that's applicable for the new system. So on my website, we've updated our EFC calculator as an example, and we've got some resources out there that kind of teach you the new way versus the old way. And that's, I think, important, that people understand that the rules have changed, and it works differently.
So just for those of our listeners, and I won't lump me into this, so just for those of our listeners that don't understand, FAFSA is a federal student. It's not a student loan application. It's a student aid application, right?
Correct.
Yeah, FAFSA is free application for federal student aid. And when you fill out that form, you apply, and you send it to the college. Well, you send it into the government, and they send it to all the colleges, and then the colleges process it, and they have the authority to award you different federal aid programs. So they can award you a Pell Grant, a supplemental grant, work study, the direct loan for the student, and the plus loan for the parent. So those are the 5 big programs. Then there's a couple ancillary, the Teach Grant, and a couple other things that also are out there. But yeah, so that's where most people start with their aid, is they fill out the FAFSA.
Okay. Well, and then one of the other questions that occurred to me was, you mentioned, and we'll use Stanford, for example, because that's the one you mentioned. Although, interestingly, I went to law school at Cumberland, which is part of Samford, Samford. And so I like when I say it quick, people are like, oh, you went to law school at Stanford? Yeah, Samford.
Sure.
So, but, you mentioned, so if I have a student who has the grades, has the scores, has the extracurriculars, has everything that Stanford's looking for, but I'm under $100,000 a year, and so they say, okay, well, your tuition is free. What's the exchange? I mean, does the kid now have to work in the school cafeteria for 20 hours a week, or
no shame there,
or what is it literally just Stanford saying it's a free ride, come here, or is it like you mentioned, work study?
Literally, right? It's literally, you fill out your financial aid forms and they say, we're $90,000 and here's a $90,000 scholarship, or we're $82,000, or whatever.
Whatever the
number is.
Wow.
And that's just the way it works. So, and again, a lot of colleges for the lower incomes have programs that are, make it, relatively low cost. I've got a resource on my website called The Cost of Colleges by State, and it shows, it shows you the prices, the list cost of attendance prices, but it also shows you the net price after free money. And at the lower incomes, it's 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 or 15,000, and at the higher incomes, it's 20 or 30 or 40,000. Now, if your income, the lowest bracket I think is 0 to 25,000 or something like that. So if your income is that low, well, 5 or 8 or 10,000 is painful.
Yeah.
And then if you're at the 110,000 plus, then the 20, 30, 40,000 is painful. And that's kind of the way things have evolved, because based on need-based aid, people that need aid will get aid, but it won't make it pain-free. And as your income climbs, you get less and less need-based aid, and therefore you end up paying more. And so the whole system, again, until you get to, $500,000 and up, where you're saying, well, I'll just write a check, it's no big deal. For most families, it's going to be a painful process. Typically, if your income's over 150,000, most state schools are going to be close to full price.
Yep.
Once your income's over 250 or 300, now all of a sudden maybe you're not getting much aid even at the private schools. And again, that's a very broad generalization, because there's all kinds of exceptions.
Well,
and that's
I'm assuming if the aid, whatever gap the aid doesn't cover, that's then where student loans come in and those types of things.
Correct.
Or college savings, or any of the stuff that we,
right.
Other tools that you can use for part of that. So that makes sense.
Yes, exactly. Right. I mean, college is paid for, with planning ahead and saving and investing, and then current income while it's happening, and then paying off loans when it's all done. So most families will take if they have 2 kids and they're going to be in college over the next 6 or 7 years, they might take 10 or 15 or 20 years to pay for it, because they save ahead of time, and or they pay the loans back after it's all over. So college is affordable. It's just not affordable, like we would, a lot of bills, we just say, okay, well, we'll just put that in the budget this year and take care of it. Most families don't do that with college. They can't just tighten the belt and say, we'll just, skip vacations and eat beans and rice for a couple of years, and that's how we're going to pay for college. Even that doesn't work anymore.
It's another no spend or savings challenge, right, George?
Right, exactly. I mean, and that's the thing, Shawn. If you're doing it at when they're young, in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, it obviously makes it a lot easier. But you're right, that not knowing that target number, that becomes the challenge in regard. Well, is it if they want to go to private school, that's 80,000 a year, or state school where it might be 15 to 20,000 a year. So right. It really, so the more time in anything, right, in any type of investing, the more time you put towards it, the more you can get back. That's always the case. But most of us who are living, was it YOLO days? We got to live for today. We can't worry about tomorrow. You become me when you have a college kid. You're like, okay, guys, how do we manage this? How are we going to pay for those things? So I mean, it's, you have to definitely look at what your situation is and see what's going to work. But I love you have courses on there. There's one there. I see that there's one that's free, specific, like scholarship guide. Of course, scholarships is a way to pay for college, but you have that college planning jumpstart. Yes. What's that all about? And why should we tell everybody go and if you're planning for college, this is the course to take.
Right. Exactly. Well, the goal of College Planning Jumpstart is to give you the core information you need to know quickly so that you can get to work and get it done. The old joke is, you want to keep something a secret, put it in a book, because nobody reads books anymore. So instead, what I've done is I've built a course. It's got some videos and that type of thing where it'll get you up to speed. And again, it can't solve everybody's problem all the time. Right. That course would be crazily complex and long, but it helps you, get through the basics of how does need-based aid work, and what do we talked about the list cost versus net price. What are the key scholarships? what are the key, the scholarship guide for busy parents. That's what that's all about. Is it's not going to help you win scholarships. It's going to help you understand the scholarship game so that you can decide, I'm going to go learn all about scholarships or I'm not. Because that's the reality. I've helped hundreds of families now directly, one-on-one, and very few of them, pursue scholarships like what people imagine, right? I did have one family, they did 39 scholarship applications. They won 7 for $37,000. And that turned out, really well for them. It covered 2 years at the state school. The challenge, of course, is when you say, well, how long does it take to do 30 some scholarship applications? That was not a Sunday afternoon. That was many Sunday afternoons.
Correct.
And it was the student and the parents working hard. Now, hopefully the parents didn't write the essays, but they could keep things organized and make sure that the deadlines are organized and help search and provide the motivation. I heard another scholarship winner say, my mom didn't do much, but she sat with me at the library and she did her thing and I did mine. But the fact that she was there and giving me the support was great. I felt like I needed to,
accountability sometimes, exactly. Just somebody to push you. That makes sense.
Exactly. And that's the reality is the scholarship process. Most students aren't going to take it on themselves and do it. And most parents, we've kind of done it to ourselves, right? If you think about how our kids typically grow up, right? Somewhere around 10 or 12 or whatever the age is at your house, they say, that iPhone thing's pretty cool. The next birthday or Christmas, there it is, it shows up. And then a few years later, it's like, Dad, you're driving me around and taking me to sports and taking me here and taking me there. If there's a car around and I could drive myself, I've got my license now. Next thing you know, a $10,000 used car shows up. Well, most kids are thinking, well, college is the next step and mom and dad have it covered. It's just like a Christmas present. It's going to come along. It's going to be college. And they don't think any different until you tell them, almost for sure. They don't really understand that there's a big difference between a $1,000 phone or a $10,000 car or a $100,000 education. They're all big numbers, money that they don't understand. And as far as they're concerned, mom and dad are going to shake the money tree or whatever they do. And
you make it work.
Happen.
Right.
And they'll make it work. And they don't know what they don't know.
So having tough conversations, Shawn, is part of this too, to kind of, hey kids, the tree is dry. We ain't got nothing back there. And we definitely need to, and I think it's just having that serious conversation of like, what's an affordable college? What can the family afford? What can we all do to participate? And I think, we don't want to, it's all doom and gloom, but we definitely want to, a reality check so that we can really say what's, maybe it's important for us to look into scholarships, do that route. That makes sense.
Well, what about the other side of it? So, I think it's great to, check out Brad, check out your resources, check out the website, engage with you for people that are in my situation, George's situation. But what about the other end of it? I had a consultation earlier this week with a friend of mine whose daughter just graduated college with a master's degree and $200,000 in debt. Is there anything you can do on that end of it, or are you strictly, let's plan to get you there with incurring as little of that debt as possible?
Yeah, I mean, that's not my expertise for sure. There's lots of student loan experts out there that help new grads or whatever come up with a plan to deal with their loans. There's a lot of different repayment, if they're federal loans especially, there's a lot of different repayment schemes, and you understanding all the options and the loan forgiveness and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, there's a lot to be done. And again, lots of people hear about these kids graduating a lot of debt. And as you mentioned, that person had an advanced degree, because for undergrad, a typical student cannot borrow their way through college. The most a student can borrow in their own name is about $5,500 as a freshman, $6,500 as a sophomore, and $7,500 as a junior and senior. After that, mom and dad are either co-signing some sort of private loan,
correct,
or mom and dad are taking a plus loan,
Parent Plus,
Parent Plus, in their own name. So when it comes to undergrad, kids that are getting in over their head, typically mom and dad are co-signing and helping them get in over their head.
Correct.
Which, again, the parents are the adult in the room, and they're the ones that need to do the math and understand what you're getting into.
But Brad, they have to go to this school. They have
Oh.
to go. Like, you don't understand. I have to go to this,
Well, yeah,
$100,000 school. What is wrong with
I
my mom
told-
and dad?
I told
Right, exactly.
I told my
And-
kids they can go anywhere that they want. I'm only paying if they go to FSU. What's wrong with that?
That's funny.
Yes, well, that's not unusual. Or, right? I mean, that was a bit of a joke, but I've had parents say that's all I'm willing to pay for is FSU. So you're going to pay the difference of whatever more, so I'll pay up to whatever the state school costs. Anything else beyond that's on you. And as a parent, maybe I'll help you borrow more, or maybe I won't, depending on. But what I encourage parents to do is, well, can the student articulate why this school that costs twice as much
Correct. Right.
is so much better than the other school over here? So that's one end of the spectrum, right? Is, well, we've got some really good options that are lower cost, but we want to pick an option that's higher cost.
Yep.
That's a tough sell. But for some families, just getting to the low cost option is going to be the challenge.
Correct.
So, if you're going to borrow crazy amounts of money or spend crazy amounts of money on college, and you're going to give up the lake home in order to pay for college, no big deal. Go ahead and do it. But if you're going to destroy your retirement and put yourself in a huge debt crisis to pay for college, well, then you probably want to avoid it.
Yeah. That's the more common situation, unfortunately, that we're in. So
Right,
that's
exactly.
correct. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and some families, they save aggressively and they consider education important, and they put that money away for years and years and years, and now they have it. And if they want to spend it, well, great, not a problem. But on the other side, when you're coming in where it's more of a challenge, well, maybe you shouldn't be spending that kind of money. The caveat to there, of course, is getting an education is well worth it, right? So if you did the kind of the cost benefit analysis, say, of someone that wants to be a nurse, and I use nursing because it's an obvious, it's an obvious career, it's an obvious well-paid career. Engineers, there's other majors. It was like, mathematically, lots of people will say, well, I'm going to start with the low-level nursing degree. I'm just going to get a certificate or whatever it is, and I'm going to go to work. And then as I'm working, I'll work my way through nursing school. In 8 years, 10 years, I'll have my nursing degree, and I will have paid cash along the way and so forth, and it'll be done. That makes a lot of sense. But mathematically, you might be better off to just go borrow whatever you need to do and get your nursing degree done, and then work and make a full nursing wage instead of a,
right.
instead of $20 an hour, make $60 an hour.
Correct.
And pay back your loans, and you'd be much further ahead. The challenge, I think, is you need to live like a college student after you graduate. That's
Correct.
the big difference, right? So if you graduate and still have 2 roommates and live in an apartment and eat mac and cheese, you'll have a lot of money to pay back your loans. Whereas most graduates immediately jump their lifestyle. I need an apartment by myself. I need to get a lot of good furniture in that apartment. I need a new car.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, your expenses and your budget immediately fill your new high salary. And if you can avoid that, and again, the math works, but I think that's where, again, a lot of times parents need to kind of explain this, and hopefully some of it will stick when it comes to, again, if you're used to living on a college campus and having roommates, it's not that terrible to continue to have roommates or continue to keep your costs low so that you have some free cash flow.
Yeah. Very important.
Yeah.
I agree with you there. I think the discipline that's necessary, if you're going to borrow the money itself, having the discipline to kind of say, okay, these are my commitments, these are my obligations. I need to, put in the budget. I'm going to save. I'm going to do this. I'm going to pay this down. That's the hard part. A lot of people, once again, I'm in that YOLO. We don't have to worry about. We'll worry about it later. And then we have, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds who are in those positions where they're still paying off student loans. They're still paying off those kind of things. And again, kind of like, what happened, and
Yep.
we don't want that for a lot of folks when it comes to planning going into schools.
Although, good
Right,
Lord,
absolutely.
I just flashed back to our episode 2 weeks ago, George, about the lessons on TikTok.
Yeah.
So if you fund an account to pay for college, does that mean college is free?
Technically, yeah, technically, right? Yeah, we don't, we don't take all the advice from TikTok. That's probably one that we don't want to take for sure. But yes, if we use that logic, yeah, that's exactly right.
So
But we won't go there.
one last thing I wanted to ask you, Brad, and you mentioned it. I noticed it in your materials. You mentioned it earlier on the episode. Was college visits? How do college visits factor into all of this?
Yeah, I think, well, college visits, there's two parts to a college visit, and it's important to realize how they fit in. But there's the tours, the getting on the campus, the walking around, seeing the buildings, the walking tour side of it, which the reality of it is there is not a good replacement for that yet. Getting on the campus and actually looking around does add a lot of value.
That's
the other part of the tour is they get you in the conference or the lecture hall, and they give you a presentation about this is our school and this is what's good about it, and here's the basics on financial aid, and you can bounce around and learn about majors and all that kind of stuff, where you're literally sitting in a classroom of some sort or a lecture hall of some sort. That part can be done virtually, I think, and there's not a lot of loss, right? You're just gaining information, watching a slideshow of some sort, listen to a panel speak or whatever. You could do that virtually. It's hard to do the walking tour virtually and get a feel for it. My oldest, we were dealing with college during the pandemic. So testing shut down, visits shut down. It was a very challenging time. Luckily, when we were doing our virtual visits, because that's the only option that was left, we had already done some in-person visits. So when we would do a virtual visit, and there'd be that tour of you're watching a video of someone walking around the campus, and and it's like, oh, well, this campus looks a lot like this other campus that I visited. You didn't get a feel from the video, other than it was kind of like something else you'd experienced in real life. So you could say, well, I'm not getting a lot from this video, but what I am getting is that this is, they got a lot of green space here. This is not the urban campus like that school. This is the lots of green space campus like this other school. And it's really big. I can look at the map and say, well, that's big. And when I look at the map of the place I visited, it's about the same size as that. But if you don't have those initial visits to put things into reference, I think that's a challenge. So a lot of times parents say things, well, do you want a big school or a small school? And colleges go, I don't know. And what they should be saying is like, well, how would I know? I've never seen a big school. I've never seen a small school. Well, how can I answer that question?
Makes sense.
Do you want an urban or rural? I don't know. I don't know what we're talking about. For a lot of students, they need to get out there and get their feet wet and understand some combination of virtual on-campus visits. So I think they're a bigger deal, and yet it doesn't seem to be, there's not a lot of people searching about college visits, as an example.
Yeah.
Scholarships, everybody's searching for. Visits and how to do visits is much less. And I think it's an important piece of the puzzle for many families, is they just get out there, do some visits, learn how it works, and help the student. And you can start local, right? My daughter, my youngest, has said, I'm not going anywhere in the Midwest, which is where we live, of course. So, okay, well, then we got to do, but we can start with local visits. In her sophomore year, we did a visit or two just locally. And she's like, well, I'm not going to the school. Why are we visiting? It's like, well, you don't have to go to the school. You have to go visit the school to learn what they look like. And
right.
Because I don't think we're going to trip around the country and do all the visits on the East and West Coast, because that's, it's just not feasible to take that many road trips and make it work. So let's do some preliminary visits, get our feet wet, just doing something local. And then if you in the fall here, if you look at most college campuses, they have some big events that are happening, right? On this particular Sunday, they've got the college open house where they're going to have, 50 staff on campus, and they're going to give tours, and it's a big deal, and 500 people are going to show up. Those types of events are nice because you're not taking a day off of school and you're not losing a day of work. You can put it on a weekend, and a lot of students especially are like, well, I'm in AP everything right now. I've got 6. I can't miss school. I set me so far back.
Right.
I can't make a habit of it anyway. Occasionally I can miss, but again, so another strategy there is, try and do some weekend visits where you can, and plug into some of these learning opportunities. And a lot of times the local school, another great example would be the local school might have a physical therapy program or an engineering program. You can go visit that school and learn about those majors, even if you're not interested in the school.
Right.
A lot of times students are like, I think I want to be an engineer, but I'm not sure what type. Well, you can learn about the types of engineering at any school. You don't have to drive to, or fly to their dream school to learn about the difference between civil engineering and mechanical engineering.
Makes
you can
sense.
learn that anywhere and just apply it, in the next stop, so to speak. So there's lots of strategies around that where, doing that efficiently and taking advantage of it and building the relationships. It can have an impact on the price if you build relationships. And, it's harder for a college to say no to someone they've met and they like than to someone that's just a piece of paper and a bunch of statistics. As adults, we've all learned it's not always what you know. Sometimes it's who you know. Most students haven't realized that yet because they hide behind their phone and aren't even willing to pick up the phone and talk to somebody anymore.
Right.
Can I just send them a text? It's like, no. I prefer you call and actually have a conversation.
Yeah, networking requires a little bit of talking. So yes.
And unfortunately, I'm learning even at a young age, politics tends to invade everything. Not politics in terms of Republican, Democrat, President, Congress, but politics, like you said, in terms of networking. I didn't even think until you said it. If I can make a relationship with some of the people, or if my kids can make relationships with some of the administrators at some of the schools, it's going to be harder for them to say no to a person than a piece of paper. That hadn't even ever occurred to me until you just said it. And I network every day, and I can't believe I didn't think of that. Now I'm going to go.
Exactly. Right. So that's what I mean is it can be it's a learning process and it's another challenge, of course, is it's never done. You can always do more. I can always get a slightly better test score. I can always get slightly better grades. I can always do one more extracurricular. And the line needs to be drawn somewhere for most kids. Some kids are very driven and they'll drive themselves, crazy and do all kinds of stuff. And other kids, will do nothing at all and they need to get a little push. So finding that balance is another key thing. But, you pay for college with money, time, and stress. And you have to kind of balance all those things where, we could do 50 scholarship applications, but do we have time, or are we better off to just skip the scholarships and pay the price and focus on grades or tests or other things that are important to us? Because I think again, there's always more you can do. Where do you draw the line, and what makes sense is, and a lot of times the people I'm working with are coming to me a little bit late, and we're playing catch up and saying, well, this is the critical path. These things have to get done. All this other stuff, if we can fit it in, we'll do some of it, but we have to get the critical pieces done and then prioritize what, these types of scholarships are most likely going to work out for you. So let's focus on those because the others are potentially a waste of time and we don't have any time to waste. So, sometimes it is a time driven situation. Other times it's a money driven where, okay, if we apply to 42 colleges at $70 per application, maybe we shouldn't apply to that many because that's a cost that, we're only going to go to one. So all those other applications are frivolous. So what's the right balance of how do we make this all work?
Good Lord.
Totally makes sense.
Now I'm scared.
Yes, you should be.
Yeah. Well, on the flip side, though, if you go to any college campus, they're full of students. So
True.
Just about everybody figures it out.
True.
Whether or not they did it well or not.
Exactly.
Who knows?
That is true.
It happened, right? People figure it out, but sometimes it's more stressful than it needs to be or more expensive than it needs to be.
But in
the end, most people will figure it out.
Yep, and that's where you come in. So I want to give again, it's tamingthehighcostofcollege.com, exactly how it's spelled. I'll put it in the notes. You can also find Brad on LinkedIn and Facebook, also at Taming the High Cost of College. I'm almost afraid. Normally when we get towards the end of the episode, I'll ask our guest, is there anything we didn't mention or anything you really feel like we need to mention? I'm almost afraid to ask you that question because we could probably go for another couple of hours here. But anything else you want to get in before we try to wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really boils down to just do it. I think for a lot of families, as you're rolling through high school, especially with your oldest, right, you're starting to acclimated to high school, and that's a big deal. And you immediately have to start working on college. It's like, okay, we got through the freshman year, we understand high school. Okay, next step. And again, not necessarily for the student, but the parents can start long before the student is ready, right? The student, maybe they can't visit till their junior year or late sophomore year or something like that. But parents can figure out need-based aid and merit aid and all that other stuff whenever whenever they get to it. So get to it earlier than you think. Spread this out, make it a little easier on yourself. Because as you learn stuff, you say, okay, well, based on what I've learned, I need to do this. And based on what I've learned when I did that, I've got to do these things. And it's this process where as you move through it, you learn more, and it just generates new ideas, new problems, new things to learn. So just do it, start early, get to work.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
think that's probably the best advice is, what is it? When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago, when's the second best time to plant a tree? Right now. So
Right now.
just start doing it. Well, thank you, Brad. We appreciate you being a guest on this week's show.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, and again, it's tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. That's the podcast. That's the website. That's the social medias. That's everything. Also, remember, magicmind.com/crushdebt. Remember Sam over at Attorneys First Insurance. I think we're going to be able to keep Brad for a few minutes to do a little short after show. So if you want to jump on Patreon, you can find it there. Other than that, am I forgetting anything, George?
No, I would just I just want to say that I when I went to college itself, I did get a full ride for 4 years. So I was one of the smart guys back then, and I didn't go to the most expensive school. So I'm going to just, toot my own horn. It is possible. You got to work hard for sure.
Yeah, I was not lucky. I had to I was lucky that I got parents that could help me pay for it.
There you go.
Then I had to take out student loans to get through the rest of law school. But I guess
Well,
that'll do it.
I didn't go to law school, so we're even.
True. And I went.
You won.
I went to a public university and I went to a private law school, so that even double. I'll be done. I'll be done. For 4 years from now, I'll be done. I'll be done paying back my student loans. I got another 4 years, just in time to take out loans for my oldest to go to college.
Well, hey, you do. Timing is everything.
There you go. So, Brad, again, we appreciate it. Taming the High Cost of College, which hopefully will help you have more money at the end of the month rather than month at the end of the money. And we will talk to you in next week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.